Fantastic. Prosper, whilst you're at it, the people of Zimbabwe are at work right now, and we understand increasingly that work is no longer about a place where you go, it's really what you do. Locate for us where the people of Zimbabwe are in terms of work. Where are Zimbabweans working and how are they working right now?
Okay, thank you so much. And when you look at the structure of the Zimbabwean economy, I think it has undergone far-reaching and ranging changes over the past 3 decades. We actually call it a jewel and enclave economy, in the sense that you have a formal economy that has been shrinking quite significantly over the past 3 decades. On the one hand, existing in juxtaposition with what I a non-formal, the non-formal economy. Now, at independence in 1980, the formal economy accounted for about 20% of the total labor force in Zimbabwe. And by the way, in 1980, we actually inherited quite a diversified and sophisticated industrial sector. I think that was the second in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of sophistication, contributing about 25% to gross domestic product. So we had an industrial sector that was quite sophisticated. But what has happened over time is that there's been deindustrialization that has taken place. Actually, right now, as we speak, the industrial sector only accounts for about 11% of total output or gross domestic output. So that speaks volumes about the extent of the deindustrialization that has taken place in Zimbabwe. So deindustrialization has given birth to what is called informalization of the economy. So there's been a preponderance of informalization of the Zimbabwean economy. Actually, right now, it is estimated that about 94.5% of labor in Zimbabwe is actually informalized. In other words, we are not productively utilizing our labor. So we have a lot of labor force that is not productively utilized. And 77% of the population of Zimbabwe are young people. And young people have been affected quite badly by the deindustrialization. And also the majority of the people in the informal are actually the young people and also the women. So most of our economically active population is underemployed in the informal economy, the non-formal economy. So that's why when you look at the official statistics, for example, for unemployment in developing countries in general tends to be very low. Why? Because they say that it's very expensive for a person to be openly unemployed in developing countries because we don't have safety nets. So we have a phenomenon of called underemployment. So yes, people are employed, but they are not productively employed. So they are underemployed in the informal economy. So the challenge now is how best do we transition that informality to formality. But some of the guys in the informal, there's also a strong bastion of entrepreneurial talent. It's not just about survivalism. There are some talented youngsters and women that are actually eking out a living in the informal. So how do we nurture them to ensure that they actually contribute more? And obviously, when you have a high informal economy, that also has implications, number one, for the efficacy of policies, economic policies. It also has implications in terms of domestic resource mobilization. So I think that also explains why we are actually experiencing these fiscal challenges.
First of all, let me hold you there. I don't know if anyone amongst the panelists would like to add your views on where we are right now. Where are Zimbabweans located, considering these issues of deindustrialization, informalization, underemployment, and a massively talented youth base that is currently not being given opportunities to contribute to the economy?
I think very topical remarks made by a fellow panelist here. Just to back up what you have been saying, it is true that about 65% of Zimbabwe's population makes up what we call in Zimbabwe the youth bulge. Now, what is interesting about this youth bulge is that by and large, as you've already pointed, it is largely informal. It is not the base that today you will say is formally employed. But what's interesting about this youth bulge is that because of the advent of technology, These are the people that are called millennials today, and they're largely using technology in the way in which they interact, in the way in which they converse, in the way in which they socialize. So I think that as a construct is really, really important. And I think one of the 5 things I would like to be able to point to with regards to the advent of technology today, and how the youth bulge or the young people of Africa's informal construct have transcended, is that technology has allowed us to become more creative in the manner in which we approach work, life, living. Technology has disrupted today what are the existing working models. Technology has created new opportunities in terms of what were traditional existing work opportunities. And technology gives us the opportunity to converge with the world. So these are other things that are really interesting for us to be able to discuss and framework as we continue this panel.
So we have opportunity with technological disruption for harnessing this potential that we have. Perhaps Ambassador Leng, could you give us an indication of other societies where we're seeing the emergence of these trends, and how other societies are effectively harnessing the potential, say, of technology to create new work opportunities, or to advance into the future of work?
Thank you very much, and great to hear from my fellow panelists. And I think Natalie and Tospa already hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're already seeing the impact of technology in what you might call traditional jobs, whether you're on a production line where used to be people sort of screwing jars, lids on jars and so on, it's all mechanized now. Even in people-to-people kind of interaction, universities, healthcare, a lot of it's now done online, including in Africa. There's a great innovation in Uganda called Clinic Communicator, where doctors can now communicate with the rural patients through SMS. Data manipulation, wasn't that long ago we didn't have jobs around people who create apps. So it's happening, and it's happening fast. And we don't know, actually, what some of these jobs will look like in the future. I think some people say we've heard it all before, technology, yes, there's some changes, but we still sort of broadly recognise work. But I think there is a real challenge to that, because we are now going through what people are calling the 4th industrial revolution. And I'm not a techie person, so I had to write this down. And that basically means the fusion of technologies, physical, digital, and biological, also known as cyber-physical systems. I'm sure Natalie knows a lot more about this than I do. But I'm well informed by those who do know that this is genuinely transformational. So in the same way the earlier industrial revolution reduced our boundaries, our physical boundaries, through sort of steam engine. Meant instead of our physical horsepower, you know, our actual bodies doing stuff, we then had infrastructure to do it for us. So that was a massive breakthrough, and you can actually see it in the data, how growth changed. There have been other minor changes. There's been computers have come along, but what people are saying is it's this 4th industrial revolution which is going to reduce the limitations of our mental capacities. So we've already dealt with the physical, we're now dealing with the mental. And this will be genuinely transformational, and it's already starting. Just briefly, though, there are obviously huge challenges. So whilst at the same time lots of jobs are going, there's actually a skill shortage, particularly at the top. The kind of skills you need for the future, and again, I'm going to point to Natalie as a good example of this. Technical skills are important, whether it's, you know, computer engineering, but it's not enough. You've got to be able to combine that with, in her case, finance. You bring fintech together. But even that's not enough. You've got to be on the move all the time. You've got to be creative. You've got to be a complex problem solver. And you also need really, really good social skills, persuasion, emotional intelligence, teaching other people so you can bring people with you. So there is actually a massive shortage of those kind of skills. So one thing we can do now, all of us who care about the future, is try and ensure those kind of skills are being created. Jumping to the bottom end, people who've lost their jobs through automation, there is a future for these people. The problem is markets don't work well for these people. So if I'm somebody, for example, in the UK, I'm in my 50s, I'm caring for an elderly parent, I could go and do maybe 2 hours work a day, but I don't know when I can do those 2 hours work. I need a market that matches my offer with the cafe down the road that could use my 2 hours when it's getting busy. These sort of markets are starting to emerge, but they're not there yet. And it's about creating those markets that enable people very flexibly to sell their skills. And it's around that whole informal economy, the service offer that people have, small-scale entrepreneurs. And I'm quite optimistic that those markets will come. So my final point on the fourth industrial revolution, what does this mean for sub-Saharan Africa and Zimbabwe? Well, I think it's actually a massive opportunity. Some people will say, how do these exponential technologies work when in countries where still don't have access to water? But it's precisely these deficiencies, this opportunity for leapfrogging, that creates the opportunity for sub-Saharan Africa. A lot of sub-Saharan Africa is not encumbered with the old style, infrastructure that we've all built. And again, fintech is a classic example of this. So it's about seeing these deficiencies as opportunities and filling that space. Thank you very much.
All right, Mungai, do you get a sense that we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution in Zimbabwe right now? There's a microphone beside you.
Well, even in the UK, not everyone is in the fourth revolution. It's a very broad spectrum of spaces people live in. If you go northern England, people will tell you that they don't feel, the life doesn't feel very different from what it was when they were demolishing the Sheffield Steel's industries. So clearly, across the world, there's a movement of people, some people call the world is getting smaller. I call it it's a small class, and that class is basically becoming global. So there will be people who will live in the midst of Kinshasa, in the midst of Harare, in the midst of Lusaka, Nairobi. They will be part of the fourth revolution. But across from America, China, India, Zimbabwe, Africa, there will be people who will be living in the previous revolution. So the question is, what does that mean for us? And I think a couple of interesting facts that I think most of you are sitting here, I see they got laptops, you got iPhones, you got Androids, you got phones, you got cameras. So just think about 10 years ago, Twitter came online. 10 years ago. 9 years ago, iPhone was launched. You take it for granted. You think it's been around with you for a long time, eh? 5 years ago, the world reached 7 billion people. 3 years ago, there were more mobile devices and connections in the world than people. This year, the world industrial producers produced the first $10 tablet. In 10 years, the world has changed more than it changed probably in my lifetime, and I'm still only a young man of 60-something. So, in terms of Zimbabwe, the question is, where are we? And I think the doctor at the end talked about the informality. 85% of the population are in the informal sector. Now, the danger with the discussion work and confusing it with wage employment is that it distorts what you consider work. If you are sitting here and you work for the Ministry of Home Affairs, and suppose the Ministry of Home Affairs had actually computerized the approval of passports, you could actually approve a passport sitting right here. It worked. You don't have to be in an office. But the technology hasn't reached here yet. There are many countries where that has happened. The ambassador here will probably do things sitting here if the security would allow her that she could have done 10 years ago just having to sit in a cubicle in her office. So the world has changed. But the world has also not changed. 60% of the Zimbabwean population, and that is the majority of the people who are the informal sector, they earn their living from agricultural work. And I know when I was a kid, going to high school, and I said, what does your parents do? I didn't want to say she was a peasant. I said they were farmers. Kind of sounded like they were making more money. The truth of the matter is that these are people, the last study showed that they earn less than $200 a month. So, and 50% of those, if they're earning less than $200 a month, it basically means they are living below subsistence. So our biggest problem in Zimbabwe and in Africa is how do we turn away from this subsistence economy? What do we need to do to get away from subsistence? And that's where the challenge, and that's the reason I work with young people, is I'm asking them, when you finish tweeting, when you finish WhatsApping up, when you finish doing your surfing, you still need to get a burger. Somebody has to produce that burger. You still need a pair of shoes. Twitter ain't gonna do it. Facebook ain't gonna do it. Somebody has to actually produce a shoe. The question is, how is this production gonna take place? Now, your technology can make a difference in terms of how efficiently I produce a shoe. Your technology you're working on can make a difference how efficient I produce a burger and how I get it to you. That you could be sitting there thinking, I'm feeling hungry. In 2 hours, I need a burger, and order is straight from your phone. And you pick it up outside. So technology changes the way we do things and changes the way we produce, but it does not change a couple of fundamental things. We still need goods produced. And the big problem we are having in this continent, and Zimbabwe in particular, is the production of goods. So what are the young people telling me? They're telling me, one, can we get you old people to become a bit more disruptive? Stop the controls. Free us. Let us find the opportunities. Because if you do that, we will give you solutions to problems you face today, which you will solve tomorrow, which you haven't even thought about how to solve them. That's what they are telling me. They are telling me, leave me to find the opportunities. Stop controlling me. They are saying, and I hear them, that I do not want to go back and work with a hoe and a plow. But I don't mind being a farmer. But I want to take the technology back to the farm. But if I don't have the security of tenure, I ain't going to do it. Therefore, I'm going to go to South Africa. So the fundamental issues we have here is the intersection between what the state does in terms of creating the framework and the platform for everyone to feel that I can take access to opportunities, and what you do as a young person. And finally, you, a young person, have a lot of capital. They tell me, no, we have no capital. Because you think capital is money. You think capital is a building. Yes, that's important. Financial capital, asset capital is important. But you got a human capital. You got good health. Most of you are well educated. That's probably some of the most important capital that you need to actually survive in the future economies. And what are they telling me about the future economies? That the future economies, there are 3 trends that are emerging. This is the latest study from, I think, Price Waterhouse. We are emerging 3 economies. The economies of work-wise, where some people think, old people like me, we look in the mirror and say, we used to live in a wonderful world where the industry worked. I woke up at 8 o'clock, I went to work, I had a job, I was going to be a big corporate person, which I became a big corporate person, and that's the future. And therefore the company, bottom line, being a corporate person, that's the future. There are companies still thinking that way, and that's one trend. There's another trend that says, we are going to be the companies, we're not going to be looking at the bottom line. We're going to care about our people. We're going to care about the green economy. We're going to worry about sustainability. We're going to worry about your life balance. Do you spend time with your family? Are you a happy person? That's the second type of emergence. And the third one is what the ambassador talked about. Small, big companies breaking up into small entities, more efficient. I don't have to be sitting in a cubicle. I don't have to be sitting in a one office. I can be working anywhere. And that, the young Zimbabweans, and I watched them, and I talked to some of them who are programming for companies in China. They are doing coding for companies in the US. They are responding to questions people sitting in the UK. And you think they are sitting there listening to me. They are not. They are busy responding a question from China, his contact in China. They are responding to a contact in the UK. They are being paid for doing work sitting here, but doing work that's done somewhere else. The question is, what do you think is going to be the future of Zimbabwe by 2030?
Naturally. So we have we're in the midst of opportunity and some are getting left out. What are the practical things that can be done? And after that, Prosper, what are the policy things that needs to be done to create a conducive environment for what Natalie is going to elaborate? In the meantime, we're on Twitter. Please contribute at hashtag ReimagineZW. Hashtag ReimagineZW. We're going to open up for questions right now. Those that are outside, you're still welcome to come in. The debate is going along. We're going to open for questions, so please scribble down your question and who you'd want it addressed to. The bathrooms as well are to the right, right? All right. So Natalie.
Great, thanks very much indeed. So thank you, Mungai, for telling us how the advent of technology has definitely transformed not only Zimbabwe, but the global space. I think one of the things that fascinates me about Zimbabwe is that there are a lot more mobile phones than we have. The population of 13 million people in Zimbabwe. And actually, there are more mobile phones on the global space today than we actually have people with toothbrushes, believe it or not. So it's interesting to see that the technology has become a lot more automated. The world is becoming a lot more efficient also as a result of that. And so the work models has changed, rightly so, as Ambassador Lang has already pointed to. And there's a lot more creativity, as Mungai and the doctor talked about. Now, the two things that I'm really going to focus on here, which make up the 5 that I talked about earlier on, is the need now for us to upskill and reskill. And also, very importantly, the opportunities that are there for us to reskill and upskill in. I want to talk about these opportunities in the context of what is happening, not only in Zimbabwe, but what's also happening in the global market space. So today, you will have new opportunities, for example, for taxi drivers, where ordinarily taxi drivers would have run around to find their own work. We now have something called Uber, where people simply have an application on their mobile phone and jobs actually are published at real time on their mobile application, and they move from one place to another, more efficiently accessing the jobs that they need to have. But here's the funny nuance on jobs. Will Uber really survive when we're starting to talk about driverless cars? Will Uber even be the future of work? So when people are thinking today about the kind of things in which they want to upskill in and the kind of things they want to reskill in, what is it that is going to be relevant? If you're a healthcare practitioner, for example, today, where we've got the introduction of e-health practitioners, for example, I remember the launching of EcoHealth last year, where people can actually call a call center number and inquire as to how they're feeling and actually get recommendation and no longer need to go and visit a doctor and pay the $35 consulting fee. Where do health practitioners actually fit in all of this? Even more extreme in Rwanda today, where they're talking about the introduction and a pilot that's happening on drones, where drones are actually distributing medicines and prescriptions in the rural areas. So do we still really have a need for physical healthcare workers or village healthcare workers that are going from one household to another so that they're able to check on people? Or do we simply need an application that sends a drone and says, there you have it? Last week in Zimbabwe, one of the things that we had was was confirmation from the government to say that they would welcome drones in Zimbabwe to assist in terms of poaching surveillance. So what happens to all of those poaching wardens that have been moving across the safari bushes, trying to make sure that, obviously the animals are well secured? This becomes the future of work. We're talking about technology disrupting traditional workspaces. When we look at something like EcoCash today, where we have nearly 27,000 agents, and these are little banks that have been set up as mom and pop shops, as spaza shops, where in Zimbabwe we have no more than 1,000 bank branches. What does the future of banking look like for bank tellers? In their thinking about upskilling and reskilling, where do they need to focus on? When you're looking at a company like Unilever that's decided to outsource its finance department today to India, where the workforce is simply posting the day-to-day numbers of their products and the sales that have been made, and all the number crunching has been done by what are called finance officers. What do chartered accountants do? So as you think about what you want to become, think about the opportunities in technology. If you're a teacher, does the classroom become the ultimate? Or are we talking about outsourcing your services to places like China, etc., where there's e-learning that becomes pretty predominant today? So some of the things that we are seeing is the opportunity to be able to create what we call entrepreneurs, where today a company like Econet, and I'm biased towards that because that's what I'm more familiar with, has created over 50,000 entrepreneurs in less than 4 years, in a time and a place where EcoCash never ever existed, and to create a product that nearly moves half of Zimbabwe's GDP in the fintech space. So we start to think about what does traditional fintech look like and what shall be the future of fintech. We want to start looking at things like freelancing, things like consulting. We want to start thinking about the work-to-life balance. Do we still really need physical offices? Do people actually need to travel to work for them to be able to do work? Or do they need to go into the office 3 days a week because there's hot desking? And this is really important because it brings down largely the fixed costs of businesses, which largely is usually crunched up in rentals and accommodation and in maintaining buildings. Can we become more efficient in the way that we deliver work? Can we redeploy our capital resources towards innovation and other things that's opposed to fixed costs? So these are the sort of things that we want to be thinking about. When we think about things like YouTube TV, what will be happening to TV presenters when everybody can actually post content, when content is simply going to be sold? What happens to people who want to be in the media? What sort of skills should people in the media be thinking about? Because the future of television and the future of the media is definitely changing. So these are some of the things that we want to think about. And a case in point that's important for us to be able to look at is a company like Amazon. Amazon has created a world marketplace where technology today demonstrates that we are individuals, people across the world are actually able to converge with the world's markets. And this is the fourth industrial revolution, I think, that the ambassador was talking about. And you have Amazon in 2015 posting a revenue of 107 billion, and that is 7.6 times the GDP of Zimbabwe. You will have a company like WhatsApp with 250 employees being acquired by Facebook for 19 billion. That is the value 1.5 times the GDP of Zimbabwe. You will have companies like Uber posting about 60% in revenue of Zimbabwe's GDP. So we want to look at the young people out there to say, how do you reskill and upskill and take advantage of convergence in the global market space to create things that never existed before, but that actually provide a lot more value than the things that existed traditionally? Because your marketplace no longer has to be confined to the 13 million Zimbabwean people that you have. Your marketplace can actually access the 7 billion people of the world that Mungai was talking about. If you're a developer today, should you be knocking at the doors of Econet or some of the blue chip companies or Delta, etc., or should you be on iTunes churning out $1 million applications that actually access, new market spaces and that are defining the new world order today? Mm-hmm. And so in closing and in parting and talking about the opportunities that are available, I would like to point to things like, are we still going to need libraries where we now have the Kindle? So what does a librarian have to do? Do we still need post offices? And you've seen a lot of them closing down where we have emails. So what does a postman do to reskill and upskill? So do we still need banks where we now have agents? Or do we take advantage of agency banking as opportunities? What do teachers do when we've got the advent of e-schools? What do we do where we have got things like Uber that are coming through today, or where we've got online shopping? Are we still going to actually need people in retail shops to serve us, or do we actually need to create our own retail shops, or do people need to start reskilling and upskilling in logistics, because maybe simply all we'll need is people to provide deliveries? So these are some of the highlights that I wanted to point to in terms of the opportunities available. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Prosper,
Yeah.
in policy terms,
Yeah.
how do we create a conducive environment for these things to happen, for our young people to reskill and upskill, for the economy to facilitate these transitions into the fourth industrial revolution?
Right. Okay, thank you so much. I think for me, at macro level, I think the question that we need to ask is, how best do we ensure that we improve the quality of the growth, not just in Zimbabwe? Because when you look at average growth rates, for example, in Africa, Africa has been growing at probably an average of 6% per annum. But that growth is not translated into productive employment, especially for the young people. So how best do we improve the quality, the pattern of the growth? We've actually generated a jobless growth in most cases. We've been destroying jobs, actually. We've generated ruthless growth pattern, in the sense that the income disparities, income inequalities have actually been widening whilst the economies have been growing. We've also generated greenless growth or futureless growth that is not environmentally sustainable. So for me, a key question becomes, like in Zimbabwe, how best do we manage our resources to ensure that we are putting more resources into the productive sectors of the economy? Because when you talk about growth or industrialization, it's basically about shifting resources from low productivity units to high productivity units. So we need obviously to create fiscal space to be able to fund or to invest in the key enablers, in the key productive sectors of the economy. And it becomes very important, number one, to focus on SMEs, for example. A study that has been done is actually shown that SMEs have the greatest potential for employment generation. And most of our young people are in the SMEs. So how do we improve productivity in the SMEs? You then need to talk about educational reforms that are necessary to improve the skills of our youths or our women in the SMEs. How do we improve, for example, agricultural productivity? You then need to talk about strengthening property rights in agriculture, for example, so that youngsters and even women who are involved in farming can actually borrow money based on the title to, or ownership to their land. You also need to talk about the social dialogue, also becomes important. How best do we incorporate the voice of the youngsters into policy formulation? So we need then to create institutions that make it possible for social key partners or stakeholders in the economy to contribute to the growth dynamic and also to benefit from the growth dynamic.
Thank you. We're still on Twitter, hashtag ReimagineZW. Please contribute. We're going to open up for questions.
I'm Mr. Lamek Bangira. I'm an aspirant of Cambridge International College for the human resource personnel. I wish to say, in this global challenging world, technology, equipment and implements are running over space of time. So basically, shall a lot of people be employed in the human resource department because machineries are taking over the chances of human personnel employment? Shall there be any chance of equipping ourselves with learning material, skills, information on how best to manage our already existing personnel who have not yet been in high chance of acquiring tertiary education or tertiary skills or technical skills from universities, vocational training centers, and so forth in the wider world?
Thank you. My name is Terence Mapuka. I'm with an organization called ZW Teens. We work with teenagers. I want to ask, when we were growing up, it was quite common people say you must be a master of a trade, not just a jack of all trades. But with the current dynamics in our work environment, is it still the same case that you should not be a jack of all trades and just be a master of one? But considering that the workspace is just merging, you can easily be in finance, you can easily be a doctor, you can easily be a restaurant owner. So I'm just directing it mainly to Natalie and Dr. Chitambira. Thank you.
My name is Tapiwa Nachi. I work for CNRG, Center for Natural Resource Governance. We are into extractives. My question is directed to everyone seated here. Is all this technology necessary? That's point number one. The reason why I'm asking is at the point in time where in Zimbabwe, we need technology that is meaningful. By meaningful, we need positive results. Technology that can help to transform the poor or to break the cycle of poverty. To prosper, I want to ask a question. Do you think we can have a policy that we can employ to manage this technology to meaningful production in terms of service delivery and everything else? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvonne. I'm from the University of Zimbabwe, and my question is directed towards Natalie. You talked about how technology is changing things. It's disrupting a lot of skills, and which is true. But if we take it in the Zimbabwean context, using our economy as the backdrop, if we look at things like e-learning, that requires access to internet, that requires access to computers, that requires electricity. And if we look at the majority of schools that are outside urban areas, electricity doesn't come easily. There are schools where they don't have the basics. They don't have water. They don't have basic infrastructure. And so before we even get to using Kindle, these children don't have books. And where we might say young entrepreneurs can create products that are not just targeting Zimbabwe, but on the global, that are impacting on a global scale, that's great for the entrepreneur. I mean, that's great for people who can access that. But how is that benefiting our community? How does that develop our country? Because that develops the entrepreneur and helps people living in developed countries. But in a country where basic commodities are still a problem, then it becomes an issue. And yes, there's some sectors that are moving fast. We look at banking. I mean, the cash crunch did help issues of online banking because now you're using plastic money. But that's one area. In the health sector, we have practitioners who are jobless. And we have, whilst these practitioners are jobless, there's so many areas where people are turning to individuals who are not trained at all in medicine to assist them. And so how do we jump from not having health practitioners at all to having drones? Thank you.
Fantastic. We have 10 minutes to wrap this up. So we'll go down, starting with Ambassador.
Thank you. I'm just going to comment very briefly on the first question. What is the future of human resources? I think it's a really interesting question. And I think there's two aspects to it. I think, well, three actually. First of all, the basic data side of human resource management in terms of pay and so on, I think is going and will be automated. So that's a good thing. That's the boring bit of human resources. I think this part about thinking about what people want out of their careers, and Natalie touched on this, and I saw one survey that, the most highly skilled people, the four things they value the most is, number one, a really good boss. Number two, really good colleagues. Number three, a good work-life balance and a pleasant work environment. And number four, to be appreciated. And actually our reward system doesn't reflect that. It still puts a lot of emphasis on, money and the financial side. So rethinking human resources around what people actually want from the work of the future. And then finally, the skills point. I think it is really important that human resource workforce planning is probably going to become more important than financial planning. Because if we're going to plan the workforce of the future, you've got to think now about those skills and encouraging people to acquire them. Thanks.
Well, nothing was put to me, so I would make two comments. One is about master of trade and master of a jack of all trades. Well, unfortunately, for most of us, we are really masters of all trades and jack of all trades and master of none. But one study done by the Californians, they are the Silicon Valley people, they found that you need a minimum of 10,000 hours put into one particular activity to become an expert. 10,000 hours. So if you want to be an expert in anything, ask yourself, how many of the 10,000 hours have you got to go? That's the first question you ask yourself. The second comment I want to make is about technology. Well, if you don't think we need technology, modern technology, I can hear the anger. I'm an old man, and I find some of the technology a bit, disruptive. But my grandfather found himself with a narrow and a spear, face to face with a brain gun by a guy from London. You can imagine who won. So if you want to be facing new technologies when you're still digging the ground with a hoe and a piece of stick, and you're still carrying your milk in some gourd, I'm afraid you're in the wrong business. It is time to start thinking about, and that my final point is why I started off. I worked in Washington. I worked with people who came from California. I see them in London. I've worked with those guys. They work in the morning. They want a coffee. They go to Starbucks. They want to live healthy. They go and find a salad. The truth of the matter is that the coffee they are drinking is produced in Ethiopia. The coffee they are drinking is produced in Bogota, Colombia. It's produced in Kenya. The salad they are eating is in London, in the case of Washington, actually growing in California, harvested by Mexicans who do not want to throw out. So when you think about globalization, it is critical because if that salad is not there, that coffee is not there, that burger is not there, they ain't gonna create anything in Silicon Valley. So my first question, I want to go back where I began. We have to think about how we're gonna solve the fundamental problems facing the people of Zimbabwe. They don't have enough food. In Africa, we are spending $40 billion a year importing food. We need to grow it. Technology is necessary, but we have to grow it. There are some basic things we have to do if we want to be creative. I hear and I want to be creative. And the young people are telling me, yes, we want to solve the real problems. And I find that they are actually quite aware. They actually need to solve the real basic problems, make sure that I meet my subsistence needs while I'm able to create. Thank you.
I think I'm going to try. Most of them have been answered, apart from the last two. But just on Lamek Bangira, what I would say in terms of human resources was also to try and look at the opportunity side of it. Would you be somebody who, as a human resource practitioner, who might now be prepared to outsource your services online and actually to provide them to multiple companies? If they say they don't need human resources practitioners, maybe what they want to start thinking about, or maybe the opportunity that's there, is for the delivery of those human resources training or curriculum. So that's an opportunity that people might want to think about. I think the ambassador has already answered ZW teens in saying that you actually really do need to be multi-skilled now. It's not just important to be a technical person, it's also important to understand the business side of it. It's also important to understand if you've created a technology, how you're going to take it to market. Social skills are critical because the world is becoming more converged. The world is becoming a lot more global. It's really important that we be multi-skilled. So, and I think Mungai put it rightly, 10,000 years is actually equal to 10 years. So if you want to take 10 years being an expert in one thing, when you could actually learn how to, multi-skill and be more efficient at accessing opportunities, those are the kind of things that you want to consider. And then I think most importantly, coming to Lloyd, who said, what are we doing, or what is Zimbabwe doing as a country to make sure that people in schools actually know the kind of things to focus on? And you're spot on, Lloyd, in that there is still a huge gap. That gap has got to be addressed, first of all, by people who have the capacity to be able to address it. And naturally, today, that is the private sector. We would like to see a lot more, actually, of private sector setting up things like hubs that provide information and education curriculum as to how people can upskill and reskill. And we can't leave it to the individuals, themselves, because people are not as capacitated sometimes to be able to access that information. So a very good example is that we have something called Muzinda Hub that sits under Econet. And we've set up Muzinda Hub so that young people can come to Muzinda Hub and learn about technology, learn how to code, learn how to gain new skills, and they're twinned with sometimes universities in the US or companies like Firefox, and they can do internships online. So we would like to see a lot more of these things coming together. I think initiatives like theSpace, sitting here and actually discussing these things is one of the imperative is one of the imperative I say progress towards addressing the gaps that are there. In discussing these, it's important that we take the conversations forward. It's important that the people that are said here, that are listening, that are interacting, set up initiatives that take these conversations forward. And I think it's interesting in Zimbabwe to say that we now have things like, the STEM policy that's being spearheaded by the Ministry of Education to say that STEM is really, really important. And it's also fantastic that it's pushing largely towards girls and pushing girls towards STEM so that they can access higher opportunities. So something's already happening in Zimbabwe in terms of preparing the next generation of the nation to be well positioned to access technology. And then Yvonne from the University of Zimbabwe says, how do we even get there? We're talking about Kindles when we have people that can't even access books. Your point is absolutely critical, and I think it hinges backwards again to what we've just discussed with Lloyd. We want to see a lot more spaces coming together to support and to provide for these things. I'll give a quick example of something called Ruzivo. Ruzivo is an online learning platform that's set up today. If you subscribe to it, I think even for as little as $5, you get free internet access from Econet to actually be able to go through the learning curriculum from Ruzivo. So I think there are things that are there. Maybe people don't know about them, but these are some of the initiatives that are around. We would like to see a lot more of them that are provided, so to be able to create this gap so that for as little as $1 somebody can have free access to education. If we can see a lot more of this happening, I think that would be fantastic. If we take examples like Silicon Savannah in Kenya, setting up of hubs to replicate what we have seen of Silicon Valley in California, are the sort of things that we would like to be able to see in Africa. I think credit to Mungai. He leads something called Innovation Baraza, where he has a lot of young people that are coming through to say, how do we innovate? How do we set up as entrepreneurs? How do we train in technology? If we can have a lot more of those things, but I think access to information is limited. And it would be interesting to see an innovator who's within this space who can correlate the various things that are happening in Zimbabwe and, drive the awareness of it so that people have access to a lot of these things. And young people, I would like to challenge young people to say, instead of getting a bundle, for $1, so that you have WhatsApp and Facebook, we've got to start reprioritizing our personal development. Can you use that bundle maybe to access a free online course instead of, a bundle every week for chatting? What about a bundle, $1, for free online course to upskill and reskill yourself? And these are really critical things. We need to start thinking about things that take us up a stage, that bring personal development towards us. Nobody will do it for you if you're not going to do it yourself. So prioritization about our personal development for access that is as little as $1 just 1 week to access a free online course, could be something that could go towards a long way for your own personal reskilling and upskilling. So prioritize your development, I think, is something that I would like to leave as a personal challenge for young people. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's been fantastic. It's a debate that is here to stay. How we work in the future, how we organize the spaces that we work in, and all that. It's a conversation that's here to stay, and hopefully we'll have a future of work that is greener, more inclusive, more equitable, that enables people to be more productive, for young people to play a much more critical role in the development of our nation. So thank you, everybody. Hope you stick around for the rest of the day's events.